Good evening. Thank you for joining us. We're just waiting a few minutes while people join in on our call, and we'll start our Citizens Oversight Committee in just a moment.
Chris, I can't see. Do we have any members of the public in the meeting? I'm sorry, couldn't hear that.
We have about 4.
Oh, okay. We're popular tonight. Okay, so we should be after 5:30 now. My name is Robert Anslow. I'm the acting chairperson of the Del Mar Union School District Measure M Citizens Oversight Committee. We're calling the regular meeting of the Citizens Oversight Committee for December 7th, 2020 to order. The documentation which will be presented at this meeting will either be shown up on the screen or is available for download on the link at the agenda link page. Michelle, if you could do the roll call for us, please.
Okay, Neelam Arya.
Here.
Ira Sharp.
Here.
Kathy Huang.
Here.
David Jackson.
He noted he was here.
Oh, okay.
Here.
Katie Hazen.
Here.
Samir Bora.
Here.
Lushao Shin.
Here.
Okay, all present.
All right, thank you. So we have a quorum, everybody. First item on the agenda is public comments. Chris, do we have any members of the public who have indicated that they want to make public comments?
We do not.
Okay. That being the case, if a member of the public would like to comment on an agenda item as we go through on the listed agenda items, please contact Chris on the link that you should see on the page. Other than that, we will proceed with the agenda items as presented. Members of the committee, we have prepared for you item D, approval of the September 1st, 2020 minutes. So if anybody has comments or changes, please let me know. If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll make that motion to approve.
And that's
Kathy.
I'll second. Katie.
Okay. Is there any further discussion by the COC members on item D, the minutes? If not, pursuant to the virtual meeting procedures, Michelle, if you could call the roll, please.
Neelam Arya.
Here.
Ira Sharp.
We need a yes or no.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I need a yes or no for what?
On the approval, on the motion to approve the minutes.
Oh, I wasn't here. So I wasn't here at the last meeting, so I have no way of knowing whether or not those minutes are appropriate.
If you want to, you can abstain.
Abstain.
Okay.
Okay, Ira Sharp.
I vote yes to approve.
Kathy Huang.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Katie.
Yes.
Samir.
Yes.
Lushao.
Yes.
So we have a approval of the motion on a 6 yes, 0 no, 1 abstention vote. Okay, thank you, everybody. One of the items, we're going to go on to item E, which is a review of allowable measure MM expenditures. If I could ask Chris at this point in time, if you could throw up the project list. There we go. Okay, for the members of the Citizens Oversight Committee, you have this in your notebooks, and I'll just cover this kind of briefly. Then we'll go into questions. For members of the public, I'm going to do a little bit of a background on this. Chris, we're getting some feedback. Do you hear that?
Yep. I would say if, here we go. I'm gonna try. I think we're good.
Okay. So just by way of explanation for the members of the public, because the Citizens Oversight Committee members have heard this already, the Proposition 39, which is approved by the state voters in 2000, which has to do with school district general obligation bond measures, requires that as part of putting forth such a bond measure to the voters, that the bond measure include a project and facilities list. The district resolution, which was passed in 2018, and again is item 8 in the COC member notebooks, includes the project list as attachment 1 to Exhibit B, which was the long form of the ballot measure for Measure MM. That project list was included in the ballot materials, in the ballot pamphlet submitted to all of the voters. The project list is 8 text pages, and I'm going to ask Chris to move from page to page when I get to that point in time. It lists the specific projects that the district is authorized to utilize Measure MM funds on. Some of those are campus specific, and some of them are more general costs that apply to all of the projects that are encompassed within the project list. Chris, if you could take us to page 3, please. And down a little bit more to Del Mar Hills Academy. So I picked out Del Mar Hills Academy just as an example. This is one of the campus by campus school projects that was listed in Measure MM. You'll see a list of specific projects that were authorized by the voters to be done at Del Mar Hills Academy. And each of the campuses that was specifically named in Measure MM has such a list attached to it. Now, we have not, on a item-by-item basis, listed out, what I like to say is, every lot of lumber, every box of nails, every spool of copper wire that goes into each of these, because that's not required. But what it is required is to describe the essential projects that are or are planned to be done at each campus. Chris, if you could take us to page 6, please. And then go down to the all school sites portion. So what we did is, rather than relist these for every single campus, this is one of the general lists that describes the additional items that can be done as part of any of the projects. For example, the first bullet is to remove and mitigate hazardous materials where necessary, because as individual campuses or buildings were gotten to on a project-by-project basis, it might be discovered that there are hazardous materials, less asbestos, lead, PCBs, etc., some of which are listed there, and some of those require mitigation. So rather than relist that for all of the sites, it was listed as a general because we weren't sure, given the age of some of the facilities, whether we might find these or not. If you look toward the bottom of the screen, you also see a bullet that talks about providing temporary or interim classrooms on other school facilities as needed to accommodate students in school functions, because some of the campuses on which the projects were going to be done would involve either a full or partial campus closure and a relocation on a temporary basis of students from one site to another while a individual project is being done. So that's an example of the general items. Chris, if we could go to page 7, please. And just under that box, you'll see a paragraph right there that also talks about project costs includes, again, more of the general items, engineering and design costs, project management, master facilities planning, state and local costs for design, planning, site and facilities development, environmental reviews, such as any proceedings that the district might undertake under CEQA, infrastructure costs, relocation costs, where we had to relocate individual facilities, audit costs, and those relate to in the event that the district had to do either an audit for the state of California or the IRS, and legal costs just as a few that are listed. We then listed other contingent costs where they might or might not apply to a given project, or might be determined in the future as the district moved through the projects on an individualized basis. Now, if you could scroll down just a little bit, Chris, to that next paragraph. One of the things that the district also added is that if it was determined that essentially it was more efficient rather than modernizing, modernizing or renovating a project, if after a determination is made that it was cheaper to essentially tear a building down, go down to the foundations and build from the ground up, that was something the voters authorized. Because every so often you will open up a building and discover something that essentially says, the cost of rebuilding this building or mitigating something is more than it would cost to build a new building. So this option was reserved by the district when it put forward Measure MN. So that's kind of a brief description on a generalized basis for project costs that are listed in the project list. Again, the committee had asked for me to go through this and just kind of refamiliarize everybody with this. And at this point in time, if there are specific questions, I'd be happy to try and answer those from any of the members of the committee. And I can't see people, Chris, so maybe you can tell me if anybody's, pinging to have their hand up and ask a question. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Chris, do we have any questions from members of the public?
Nope, I don't see any. We don't have any public comment or requests.
All right, thank you all for members of the committee for indulging me and letting me talk on that subject. But again, I would point out that attachment 1 is listed in tab 8 of your physical notebooks that we gave you when you came on as members of the committee. So we're done with item D. We'll move on, and E. We will move on to item F, the bond payment log.
Thank you, Chris. Good evening to the Citizens Oversight Committee. It's great to see you. Tonight, we're presenting expenditures through November 30th, 2020. You can go to the next page, Chris. Our first project we'll review is actually a new project that we did this summer. We installed some flooring around the district, except for at Del Mar Hills, because that's next in line for modernization. So we didn't do the flooring there, since that will be part of the modernization project. But we did 2 primary classrooms at each school site, and the cost of this from the general obligation bond is about $95,000, which includes the flooring. A&S Flooring did the install, and Chandis Flooring supplied the goods, the hardware. Our next project is the Del Mar High School rebuild project, and the budget still remains at $57.8 million. And we can see that we made a few budget adjustments. There's $91,000 moved from project contingencies up to the other site costs, and another $108,000 moved up to the other site costs, which we'll see on our next page a little more detail. So we have used up all of the project contingency that we can see on this budget. However, embedded in the main construction line on the $49 million, we still have about $3.1 million in construction contingency. So we can see this other cost, about $108,000, is some of the legal fees that are coming in related to the lawsuit that we're engaged in. So we can see that it's encroaching on our budget. but we will not be adjusting our construction budget at this time, since that's what's been scoped to meet our educational needs. So at our next meeting, we may see an increase to the overall budget.
Mark, could I ask a question?
Yes.
This is Kathy. I think we had mentioned at a previous meeting that it would be very helpful to have a total project, kind of like a consolidation of all the mini projects. And this is one of the areas that would be helpful to me, as well as later, and I can bring it up again when there's another new project that pops up. So is there a possibility where we could have a roll-up of all these different projects plus what's not currently allocated? Because otherwise, I think some of these projects we could lose track of.
Yes. Chris is going to speak a little more on that, and
okay.
We know
yes, because I know that Sage Canyon, we had the MUR audio visual project on our last meeting, but this time it dropped off because it was fully paid, right? The budget was completed. But I can see as things go on, if many of these things start happening, we don't have the full picture of what's remaining in the total measure funds.
Yes, we'll bring more information on that at the next meeting. And Chris will touch on that a little bit in his presentation also.
Yeah, I have like similar comment, right? If for example, this project cost increases from what is budgeted, it will be good to know what is the impact on the other projects, if any.
Thank you, Samir. Chris, we can go to the next page to the detail. Okay, so we can see, I'll focus on the additions column right now. We had additional expenses of about $130,000 in our legal fees. We had an increase to our Baker Nowicki architect contracts of about $45,000, which was for additional coastal development permit work. We had some fees that we had to pay to the city of San Diego related to the coastal development permit. We awarded a contract to Coxstone Resource Management, and they're doing a historical review of the site for us. We engaged Boxline, which they're also helping with the coastal development permit process. And we increased the PlaceWorks contract by $40,000 for additional coastal development permit work. And we can see the current expenditures for this progress report. We have $697,000 in expenditures, which we'll look at on the next page, unless there's any questions on this one. So this is just the detail of the expenditures, the $697,000. I explained the new vendors. I'm not sure if there's any questions on the current vendors that we already have. Okay, hearing no questions, then we will go on to the next project. Our next project is the Pacific Highlands Ranch School number 9. And we have
Mark, I'm
yeah.
sorry, I did have one question on page 11. Under Division of State Architect, there are just two small fees which are not an issue, but the date shows up as May 14th, which is before our last meeting, and the last expenditures were through August 31st. So I was wondering, is that a typo, or was something, missed or something? I'm not quite sure why those dates are before the last roll-up of the expenditures.
I'll look at that, Kathy, while Chris is presenting and get back to you.
Yeah, and I believe, Mark, with both of the interim housing, the DSA charges on your final construction costs. The final construction cost was slightly higher than than what we had put in, because you don't want to put in higher or you end up overpaying and they don't refund you. And so Mark would have to confirm this, but I would imagine, Mark, that those, because I know that those two amounts are small amounts that were to finalize the DSA cost for the interim housing. So the date may be tied to when we initially paid, and then those were the additional fees.
Next, we have the Pacific Highlands Ranch School number 9 budget, and we did make a few minor budget adjustments, but did not increase the overall budget. We have our contract for our inspections, so we reduced that budget downwards, and we awarded a contract for our construction testing, and it was slightly over what we anticipated, so we had to increase that by 68,000. Overall, it's still net zero. We can go to the next page, Chris. So again, I'll focus on the additions column. We awarded Alpers Engineering Group. They'll be doing our Title 24 commissioning on our building for about 44,000. We awarded a contract to Blue Coast Consulting for the construction inspections. And we did approve increment 1 of the project. So we'll be, Eric Hall will be working on that. And we also awarded Nino and Moore the construction testing. So that's a total additions of about 5.5 million. And then looking at the current expenditures column, for this reporting period, we have about 389,000 in expenditures. We can go to the next page, Chris. And these are the current expenditures for Pacific Highlands Ranch, school number 9. Okay, Chris, we can go on to the next one.
Mark, a quick question, or Chris, how far does increment 1 take us in terms of the building costs?
Increment 1 is the site groundwork, grading, site utilities. So it's maybe 10% at the most.
Great.
Increment 2 is much more substantial, as it was with Del Mar Heights School rebuild. Increment 1 also was a much smaller number compared to the overall total cost.
So next we have the Torrey Hills School Field Upgrade Project. So over the summer, we were working on replacing the field at Torrey Hills. We have our budget of 993,000. Just a very small budget adjustment to actual. We can go to the next page, Chris. So on this one, we did have a net reduction to the contract for 3D Enterprises, and this was because we ended up needing less dirt to fill the field than we had anticipated, but there were some other small additions overall on the project. Also, we added a little more gopher meshing, and then we had the gopher moves to the kindergarten area, so we also had to do some work on the kindergarten area to prevent the gophers from coming back to the kindergarten area. But overall, for that project, we reduced the contract by about 65,000. And we can see the payments made for this reporting period below that. Okay, Chris, we can go on to the next one. Another summer project that we had and are still working on is the Sage Canyon School HVAC controllers. And these are to integrate the HVAC system with our energy management system. We budgeted $110,000 for this project, and we've spent $47,000 so far. We have Landmark Mechanical, they're doing the install of the controllers, and Russell Sigler supplied the equipment for the project. Seeing no questions, Chris, we can go on to the next project. We've also began discussion for the Del Mar Hills Academy Modernization Project, and we currently have set a hard construction cost of just under 15 million, so 14.8 million. We have a 5% project contingency and a 30% soft cost, which includes architect fees, other TSA fees, and inspections. Those kind of items are the soft costs that we're expecting. So we have budgeted about 4.4 million for an overall budget of just under 20 million. And we did have just a few legal fees on this project related to contract negotiations with Linakis, which we awarded as the architect. Okay, Chris, we can go on to the next project. And finally, the last project that we have tonight is the Del Mar Hills Academy field upgrade. And we're still in the planning processes of this, and there were actually no expenditures for this reporting period. Hey, Chris.
There is a $3,900
project expenditures.
Excuse me?
There's the $3,900 expenditure, right?
Well, that one was reported at the last meeting.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay.
Thank you, Mark. That's item F. Are there any last questions from any members of the committee on F before we leave that one? Okay, if not, Chris, I think item G is yours.
Thank you. Just a moment. Yes, thank you, Mr. Hanslow. And members of the Citizens Oversight Committee and our public, tonight I'll do a project progress update. So as Mark spoke to, we will talk a little bit about our capital improvement plan review, and I'll talk a little bit about some next steps with that. Pacific Highlands Ranch School number 9, Del Mar Heights School rebuild, and Del Mar Hills Academy modernization. We'll do some overview on those major projects. For the capital improvement plan, I spoke at the last meeting about some of the work we were beginning and that we were consolidating some of our projects. You will notice that our Del Mar Hills budget is part of that, and so we have that budget looking at some consolidation, but we're also still in the process of reviewing some of the impacts of the delay. And so we are still working on that overall plan. I can say to the COC that when we originally did the capital improvement plan and originally scheduled out the projects, we always had at the end of the bond program a net of $3 to $5 million minimum in each iteration. So we always had the bond program laid out in such a manner that by the end we still had some money as part of an overall bond program contingency. We are working on an update that incorporates consolidation of projects so that we aren't having campuses going back to over and over and disrupting campuses. And we are able to actually, with that, I think, find some benefits because of not saving some projects to the end where escalation impacts it as much. Our plan is to bring that to the board in January or February and then bring it to the COC right after that so that we can share with the COC and the school board the work that we've done with the capital improvement plan, the updates that we've made and the tweaks, where ideally we aren't losing projects, but we are moving some things around a little bit to consolidate projects. And then we, hopefully by the new year, we will know a little bit more about the litigation, and that will help us as well with some of our review of delay impacts, because we'll have a clearer eye and a clear understanding of some of those impacts. With that being said, I should have transitioned into Del Mar Heights because it would have been a smoother transition, but Pacific Highlands Ranch School number 9, as I've done the last couple of meetings, I've tried to keep it with these same topics that really bring us through the planning and then construction of the project. At this point, Pacific Highlands Ranch School number 9, we are through all of the planning and the purchase of the property. We have submitted our coastal development permit application. We are in a cycle review that will end next week. And then based on that cycle review, should there be outstanding comments, we will have to resubmit. We are hopeful in our work with the city that this cycle or next cycle would end that. Once we finish with that review process, we will go to the city to a hearing officer who would make a determination. The upside is that through our work with the city, that would be going to the hearing officer with a recommendation from the city and likely would lead to the city providing us the permit. And at that point, we could start the increment 1 work. As we see here for DSA, Division of State Architect, increment 1 has been approved. Increment 2 was submitted in September of this year and anticipated approval early 2021 in January or February likely. We will know more as we get into the beginning of the new year and they've gone through some of the initial review, and then DSA will provide some comments, and then we go through a process of back and forth so that our architects and DSA can get it to the final piece. We still anticipate construction to begin sometime in winter of 2021. So January, February, we are hopeful, and as soon as we get that coastal development permit, we will be able to break ground. And then we will still be finishing it up in spring, summer of 2022, certainly in time to open the school in August of 2022. With the Del Mar Heights School rebuild, as we've shared, we've completed, I apologize. This slide I meant to update. So our litigation hearing for CEQA. CEQA is complete. As we have shared, there's been litigation challenging our CEQA determination. Originally, the CEQA hearing was scheduled for November 18th. Subsequently, it was continued to December 3rd, and then once again was continued to December 22nd. So I had hoped that I would have as a result when I was originally preparing this for you, and this is the slide that I should have updated further. My apologies. We are believe that we will have that hearing on December 22nd. We've been in conversation with our legal counsel, and we originally were to have that as an in-person hearing. It is our belief that it likely will not be in person based on the stay-at-home orders, but we are still monitoring. We have added a website page under our Del Mar Heights School rebuild page related to the litigation, and we've been updating it as we get more information so that the public can be aware of the litigation and what is going forward with it. As soon as we have that December 22nd hearing, we anticipate that within 2 to 4 weeks we would have a result from the judge that is hearing the case. There are holidays in there, but should things move forward as we anticipate and have a hearing on December 22nd, we would expect that by the middle to the end of January we would know the results of that hearing, and that will, as I was saying, with looking at the capital improvement plan and the long-term planning, that will help to refine what the next steps look like, because rather than having a number of potential outcomes from a hearing, we'll have one outcome, and where we will be down to a little bit more clarity on the next steps that will result from that. With our coastal development permit, we are still working through that. As I've shared in the past, that has taken a longer period of time, and once the litigation started, it did add a layer as the city worked with us, but then also consulted their city attorney and added some layer with the permitting process. We have a cycle review that has just ended, and a piece of that is an environmental cycle review that ends next week. So we should know more about that, and that will lead, based on that result, to either a resubmittal that we would hope to get in before the holidays, and we believe we are at the point, based on our conversations with the city, where we should be to the final submittal that has the final information. So we are hopeful that the city will be ready to move us on to a hearing and recommend us for a hearing, hopefully before the holidays, but likely it would happen soon after the holidays. Once we get that through, then we get that permit, we would be able to break ground on the Del Mar Heights school rebuild. So we have those two pieces that are the important items in the timeline, in the coastal development permit process and the CEQA hearing and litigation. And we're getting very close to having much more clarity on that by getting the coastal development permit and having a result from that hearing. With Division of State Architect, since we've last met, Increment 2 has been approved. So we now have the full plan set approved by the Division of State Architect. That is very helpful because it means that as we get the coastal permit, we are in position to be able to build the full project pending the results of the CEQA litigation. And then I still have it to be determined for a construction because it is pending the coastal development permit. Once we get the coastal development permit, we can start our Increment 1 and start the groundwork and the demolition. But we also are, to a certain degree, pending that litigation result and having a better understanding of what that means and what that entails. And so there will be more information known by the district, and then we will be sharing that with the governing board because there are potential decisions the board has to make as we know more about that timeline with the steps we take to move forward.
Chris, I have one question on this.
Yes.
So since this whole timeline is getting delayed, what is the plan for the next academic year for the students who are attending this school? And then is that going to impact other projects or this bond measure?
So it's the plans for the 21-22 school year are something we're actually working on at our district office level, and we'll be sharing with the governing board so that we can make decisions as we move into the early parts of 2021, and we know more about both our work in the planning, and the board will be able to make decisions, and then what happens with the litigation and the coastal development permit. We'll work with the board to make decisions on the students who are off campus currently and what that looks like for 21-22. With respect to future projects, the next project that we would anticipate, major project completing, is Del Mar Hills School Academy's modernization. That, at this point, will not start construction in the summer of 2021. So, barring the 22-23 school year being a time when students were off Del Mar Heights campus, it would not impact that project. So we have a little bit of a buffer to be able to do planning and look at how that might be impacted. And that is something that we are actively working on right now with staff, and we'll be sharing with the governing board and giving guidance and advice as the governing board helps to make decisions in some of those next steps.
Chris, I have a quick question. I can't remember if we may have talked about this at the last meeting, and I just don't remember, so forgive me if we've talked about this before, but I remember originally part of the reason why the cost for the Del Mar Heights school rebuild was higher was because we were paying extra to have it done really fast, right? That we were expediting the process. So with the delay, is there a way to like cut back on some of those costs? Like if we're going to say, okay, it's going to take another school year, like can we pull back on some of those expedited things?
It's something to could be considered. However, with students off campus, we would right now look to continue to have it moved fairly quickly. For example, if we were able to break ground early in the new year, we would be in a position where we could actually phase and have students move into the campus in the next school year because we still have that timing. So a portion of it was the fact that we were trying to build the campus in 14 months. I don't know that we won't want to still do that. because we still have students off campus. And so whenever we do this build, we still have students off campus, and so we still will be looking to build it in a certain time frame so we can get students back onto the campus.
Chris, with this delay with Del Mar Heights, are we running into issues with the timing of the bond money distributions?
Not yet. And I would defer to Mr. Anslow, but I know in the past he's spoken to the fact that litigation is one thing that the IRS is somewhat understanding of when you aren't able to disperse the 85% of your bond funds that you were expected to. At this point, we're in a spot where we're learning a little bit more about the litigation and the coastal development permit in the coming couple of months. We will certainly have enough time to know how much we'd be able to spend. And then, again, I would maybe defer to Rob if I'm misspeaking on his what I understand him to have said about the IRS.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. From an IRS tax perspective, something like this where you run into litigation that you did not anticipate at the time that the bonds were issued is absolutely something the IRS, if they were to audit the Series A bonds, is absolutely something that they would consider in terms of hitting the threshold for the anticipated bond fund expenditures. And the district is in process, as we've seen with Mark, of moving forward with the other projects on the timeline that was projected. With Del Mar Heights, we've run into a series of issues that were not anticipated at the time the bonds were issued in 2019. And yes, those are the kind of unanticipated consequences that the IRS would absolutely consider if they had a question relative to the expenditure of the bond funds for federal tax exemption purposes. So Chris is entirely correct.
I'd also just mention that 3 years is October, I believe, of 2022. So we do have some time. And, if there were delays beyond what we foresee, we would obviously have conversations about other projects that we could potentially pull forward. But again, we have a lot of, it appears that we will have a lot more information coming our way over the next month or two that will make this a clearer project going forward as to what may arise, because we have so many variables right now that will help us in the long-term planning when some of those variables are turned into more concrete facts.
It seems to be becoming more and more apparent that we're going to be building 2 schools, or maybe 2.5 schools at the same time. But as soon as we get green lights on that, Del Mar Heights, we're going to move forward as quickly as we can, as well as the Hills and number 9.
With number 9 and the Heights for sure. With the Hills, with the time and effort it's taken to kind of marshal some of the litigation, coastal permitting, we are behind where we would have been in that we would have done some planning already this year for Del Mar Hills. So I would say that right now we are looking at summer of 23 as times when we might start construction. But that is all subject to us starting the planning process. So once we start the planning process with the community, which again, pending what happens with some of this work over the next month or two, we would move forward with there. We'll have a better idea of the timeline with that as well.
I also have a quick question. Again, the Del Mar Heights was put as a first priority over school number 9 for a couple of reasons. And now because of this litigation really slow things down. So I'm wondering, like, if this further being the situation, whether it's possible to consider switch the orders since the other one is almost ready to move forward, and this one is causing so much trouble and slow down the whole process. Will there be considerations of switching the order of priorities in terms of building school number 9 instead of putting all the priority on Del Mar Heights first?
Yeah, well, I would actually say for sure that we prioritize them kind of as 1 and 1A, and so we were working on them at the same time, more parallel than one has to come before the other. Part of the reason why Del Mar Heights was going to be completed first was because we wanted to have students off campus for only one school year. And so what will happen is we haven't stopped or slowed down with Pacific Islands Ranch. We are working to finish the coastal development permit, and the minute that's done, we will be breaking ground on that project. So Pacific Islands Ranch will be done for August of 2022, and regardless of what happens with the Del Mar Heights School rebuild. I'll move forward unless there are any other questions on Del Mar Heights. And Del Mar Hills, so Del Mar Hills modernization, we've kind of touched on this. To be honest, it's all to be determined. We do have an architect on board, Lionakis. I have had some preliminary meetings, and our next step will be to have some meetings with our district leadership and the principal to start to have some of the initial conversations about the basic scope, and then we go into the design symposium process with the community. This obviously has been delayed, as I said once or twice in this meeting, due to the time and effort and work that it has taken to work through the litigation and the city process with Del Mar Heights, and actually some extra work with city process with coastal permit with Pacific Islands Ranch. And so this project is still the next project up. It just has been delayed due to all that's come with the litigation and the work that's gone into Del Mar Heights. I still anticipate us being able to start that design process during this school year, but it'll be more towards the end of the school year rather than the beginning of the school year. Once we get that design symposium process and get the community inputs, we'll also be starting our CEQA process, and then that community input and design symposium process will help us to get to final documents we'll bring to DSA. And once we get CEQA completed and DSA completed, approval from the Division of the State Architects, we would be able to move into construction. So I will be able to update you hopefully at the next meeting, but maybe not until the following meeting as we get closer to the end of this 2021 school year with a construction timeline. But with the delays, I'm just not comfortable giving you a timeline right now because it may very well change. Again, as we get a little more information from Del Mar Heights, I will be able to update this with potential timeline dates and hopefully be able to share that out with you at the next meeting that we have.
This is Neelam. I just have a question about the community input in the design symposium process. Are you expecting to follow a similar process that was followed with the Del Mar Heights project? I know that I participated in that design. Like, are you a similar plan?
Somewhat similar, Neelam, but it's a little different because Del Mar Heights and even PHR number 9 were brand new ground up. So there was a little bit more of a blank canvas that you could have. Whereas with a modernization, there are some constraints because while we have a very healthy budget for a modernization of this school, it does have more constraints. And so what we will do is we'll be able to bring some of the ideas within those constraints, and then we'll have our community help us to vet it out so that it is community driven, but it won't be the blank slate we started with at Del Mar Heights because we just don't have, we have more of a defined space already.
Okay, but I think given that how the process for Del Mar Heights was so contentious, although it didn't seem like it was contentious when we were going through the initial sets of community input or the symposium, I think it might be nice to as we share information with the community about what those parameters are now that they know more about how some of the processes have gone for Del Mar Heights and for Pacific Highlands Ranch and so forth. So people are fully aware of what's going on. Yeah.
Similar to Del Mar Heights and PHR, I think the first meeting would be to lay out here's the process and here's how we plan to go through this, and then we definitely will be very straightforward with here is the design process, but we similar to those projects, we anticipate anybody who would like to participate being able to participate, and we will reach out to try to get input from the whole community as we come to identifying the priorities that lead to our final design for that modernization. And so with that, that is the project progress update for this month. I'd be happy to answer any other questions that may have come up.
Thank you, Chris. Do we have any questions by members of the committee or members of the public? Hearing none, we will move on from item G to item H, one of my favorite but least successful topics. Going to again open the discussion and see if there's any desire to unseat me as COC chairperson. And as usual, there's a stampede to the back. Okay, so I will continue as your COC chairperson until you members of the committee decide otherwise. Let's move on to item I, which would be scheduling our next meeting for the Citizens Oversight Committee. Chris, I'm thinking probably, early March. Does that work for where we expect to be in terms of the various projects?
I think early March would be fantastic.
Okay. Let's look at the calendar if we can. Normally we've been doing meetings on Monday, so March has 5 Mondays in it. One of those is a holiday, I think. My calendar doesn't indicate which one. But is there anybody who would like to open up discussion about which of the assuming Mondays are still good into 2021, is anybody who would like to pitch out a date? Chris, maybe the 8th?
I would suggest the 8th. I will say the 1st, there is a conference that I don't know if I'll be able to attend or if it'll be online or what it will look like at this point, but it is a conference that I'm scheduled right now to attend on the 1st.
Okay, so let's look at, is there any objection to setting the next COC meeting for Monday, March 8th, 2021? Anybody have any problem with that? I see Katie's got a thumb up. David's got a thumb up. Kathy's got a thumb up. Okay, so looks like that's our next date, Chris, is March 8th, 2021. And it'll be same time, 5:30. One item to note as we move into comments from board members, and I'm just going to usurp a little priority here, is given when the COC members were originally appointed in 2019, the 2-year term for most of you will be running up in about March, April of 2021. And so the district is evaluating what it wants to do in terms of reappointments for members. And so we will probably share that with you at the March 8th meeting. So Michelle, if you would note that we probably want to have a discussion with the COC members about their terms at the March 8th meeting. So that's something to add to the agenda. That being said, are there any comments from board members or any items you would like to see added to the March 8th agenda? Any items you'd like to see brought forward, or are you generally good with the way we're presenting things now?
So the only, the only comment, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The only comment related to that, I know that I'm going to have to step down. So I don't, with respect to your last comment about the terms of service. So I don't know. I was expecting to fill the 2 year, but and it certainly can, stay on for 1 or 2 more. But that is, I will need to step down.
Okay. Do you mean to step down in 2021 or sometime further in the future?
So I will be at the next meeting. I can't guarantee that I'll be at the meetings after that.
Okay, well, if it's your desire to essentially, and you'll serve the 2 years and not put your name in the hat for future 2-year terms. If you could just communicate that to Michelle and Chris, so that we know that we're going to have at least one spot on the Citizens Oversight Committee we'll need to fill.
Great, I'll do that.
Thank you. Anybody else, announcements, comments, items you'd like to see added to the agenda?
Rob, I just wanted to comment that the COC members can serve up to 3 consecutive 2-year terms. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that's correct. And they can serve any number of, an unlimited number of non-consecutive terms. So if someone decides, gee, I need a break, but I'd like to make myself available, some years out in the future, that's certainly something we would like to know. I think our plan, our succession plan is something we should be prepared to discuss with the committee members at the March 8th meeting. Thank you, Mark. Anything else?
Kathy, I just followed up on those DSA payments. They were actually for October 22nd.
Okay, anything else? Any other comments, notes? Again, any agenda items you'd like to see brought forward? I think we had a request at the last meeting for an update on the overall district Measure MM project budget. That wasn't ready for this meeting because it still hasn't been approved by the school board, but hopefully by the time we get to March 8th, we'll have an update for you at the next meeting. Anything else, folks? Okay, Chris, any last comments from members of the public, or are we good?
Nope, we don't have any.
Okay. In that case, thank you everybody for attending, and we will see you the next time, March 8th, 2021. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Holidays.
See you.
Holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Take care.
Thank you all.